I'm already
Well, we are
with
honored
you.
here to have this very wonderful guest with us. I'd like to first introduce someone who I'm lucky enough to call my friend. Sarah J. Maas is here with us. She's, of course, #1, again, New York Times bestselling author, whose books are now published in 35 countries and who manages to cause a huge commotion of excitement wherever she goes. Many of us sitting here have fallen in love with the worlds and characters Sarah has created in her Throne of Glass and A Court of Thorns and Roses series. Her heroines find strength from friendships, from within themselves, from bonds, and even, sometimes, one of my favorites, from within the pages of books. They must battle evil and monsters, save princes and high lords, and overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. We love to read the stories she so incredibly weaves and puts into the pages of her books. Unfortunately for many of us, at some point in our lives, we will have obstacles to overcome and battles to fight in our own real worlds. Also joining us today is Josh, Sarah's husband, and Brian, Sarah's father. Thank you for making the trip, guys, to be here with us. But none of these amazing people would be joining us today without the survival of Sarah's grandmother, Camilla. Camilla's story is that of a real-life heroine. As with Sarah's fictionalized characters, her grandmother has experienced a world with monsters to battle and real obstacles to overcome. We've read and learned about many historical and current events that depict horrific violations to human rights. Today, we are so grateful to have Camilla here in our classroom with us to tell us about her battles, her journey, and how the kindness and courage of everyday people can change the life of another. Please welcome our guests.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming today. I have traveled around the world a couple times now, and one of the things I never get to do is have events with the people who are in my life, my family members. If you come to some of my signings, you might see Josh, my husband, stamping your books. But I never get to actually do an event and talk with someone in my family. And so this is a big first for me. And it's also a big first in another way because I've never really heard my grandma's story told in full. We've had bits and pieces over the years, but when I grew up, I knew I can't even remember when I learned, but I've always known that my grandma was a Holocaust survivor, and she's been my hero since I was a little kid, in part because of her incredible story, but also because she is a world traveler. And I've been to a lot of countries, but my grandma has been to like almost every country out there. My grandma just came back from a 20-day trip to Vietnam. Can I tell them your age?
Do they need to know?
She is still traveling, and my grandma gave me my love of travel, actually. From a very young age, my grandma would come back from these trips with presents and pictures, and she would tell me all about the people she met and the history that she learned and the cultures that she encountered. And that was huge for me and my writing. And this woman here gave me my interest in the world. And not just in foreign, far-off places, but in the town down the road. My grandma always wants to know why and how, and every person she encounters, whether they live in America or in Vietnam or Mongolia or any place, she wants to know about them. And every place she goes, she listens with her ears, but also with her heart. And she gave me that, and I think a big part of the way I tell stories, it's inspired by the places I go to, but it's inspired because she taught me how to listen, how to be curious and excited about the world. And I've always loved that about her, but her own story has been probably my favorite story out of any I've written, any I've heard, and I don't want to talk too much because I know that we're pressed for time, so I'm going to let her take it away. But this is my grandma's story is my story, and my grandma is a refugee, and I think you guys have been learning about refugees, and so I'm the granddaughter of a refugee, and my family is my life, and my grandma is my favorite person, so I'm very honored. I brought your tissues up here.
Oh my God.
I'm very honored to be talking to you guys today and with her.
I have this ready.
I like that we have the Elsa tissue box. It's very fitting. And I'm just gonna have to let it go, you guys, and just let the tears go. but I'm gonna let my grandma kick it off, and she's gonna tell you guys about her childhood. She began in Frankfurt, Germany. And do you wanna?
Yes, we'll take it from here. I'm looking at all of you who are probably, 15 years old, right? Or 14 to 15. And by the time I was your age, I had changed languages twice. First German, French, English. I'd left my family, lived with a kind family in Belgium, in a displaced children's establishment in France, and then as a foster child in America. And you see that I've been fortunate, I've been lucky. I've become an American citizen, which became my major goal. But let's start at the beginning. My parents were Polish. My father had gone to Germany to study in Munich. It would be nice to have a map, just to, there's a time and road map in these stories that we tell when we come from elsewhere. And he and my mother's families knew each other, and their marriage was an arranged marriage, just like in some of the old stories you hear, arranged marriages, and it worked. They became very much in love and moved to Frankfurt, and that's where I was born, and 15 months later my brother was born. My father was a business owner, he was a metallurgist, and my mother was a homemaker, and we had a comfortable, really pleasant life. We even owned a car. This is back in the early 30s. Not too many people owned cars. And gradually, as a child, now it's my story, it's not my mother, father's, or anybody else's story. What I'm trying to tell you is it's my story from my memory. And memory is also partly perception, It isn't always exactly what happened, it's how I perceived it to have happened. So probably by the time I was 6 or 7 years old, we noticed that there were establishments we could no longer go to because Jews were forbidden. In German, it's Juden verboten, means Jews forbidden. So the place where my brother and I used to get haircuts, or the swimming pool, it was called a natatorium, where we took swimming lessons, gradually we could not go. Other stores that were German-owned, Juden verboten, which to a 6 and 7 year old child doesn't mean a whole lot, because our parents took care of us. But then one night, or early morning, or middle of the night, in the fall of 1938, big loud knock on the door. We all awoke, and two leather-coated German SS men came to drag my father away. And that's how so many of the men, it started with the men, disappeared for a while. That same day, my mother packed us up, took us to the train station to go to Poland, to go to her parents, to my grandparents, but we weren't allowed to go. At the border of Poland and Germany, we were sent back. So this would have been, I would say, October, early November of 1938. I was 7 years old, my brother was 6. We continued going to school because we went to a Jewish parochial school, so we could continue going to school. And then one day, this was told to me because I don't remember it. I was hit in the head with a stone. This happened, and it was decided to send the children out. My mother arranged through an agency to put us on a train, and we were sent to Belgium and separated. I didn't see my brother again for 2.5 years. I lived with a Catholic family who I went back to Belgium, in 1995 to try to find them. But I had no information, nothing was written down. Remember, by then I was 8. I had no name, I had no address. I just knew it was somewhere in Antwerp, I think. But it could have been Brussels also. And I was with them until the Germans occupied Belgium, which was in May of 1940. This wonderful family took me with them as they left Belgium. By car, by road, by walking until we crossed the border into France, and there they knew it was dangerous to harbor a Jewish child. They turned me over to an agency that had renovated castles where displaced children from all over Nazi-occupied countries. It wasn't just from Belgium, it was from other occupied countries. I think, was Holland occupied by then, Brian? 1940? All right. And I lived there in south of France for 15 months until I got notification that I was on the list to come to America. And remember, I hadn't seen my brother or heard anything about him since early 1939, and this is 2.5 years later. And I said, I can't leave without my brother, find my brother. He had also been saved from Belgium to France, and he was living in a Quaker-run camp for children, for displaced children. They found him, brought him to me, and we left France in August of 1941 through Spain and Portugal. And from Portugal, we came by ship to the United States. There were 50 of us children who were on that transport to the United States. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the history of the United States taking in refugees from Europe at that time. We, after passing all inspections of health, that we were healthy, we had been accepted into a foster family in Rochester, New York. So we came by train on October the 5th. There are some dates in one's life you never forget. October 5th, 1941. And we came to a family in Rochester. There was a mother and father and a daughter who was just about to turn 8. And there were agencies knowing that if some children from Europe were coming who asked Jewish communities in the United States to please take in some of the children that were coming. Remember, we came without parents, so we needed foster families. I was lucky. My brother was lucky too. We came into a very nice family. We went to school like 4 days after we arrived, learned English. Neither one of us, actually, we had forgotten our German already because in Belgium and France, we learned French. We lived in the French-speaking part of Belgium. There's the Dutch part and the French. And we came to the United States, went to school, learned English. I don't think it took us a month. We were communicating with our peers and with people. So, yeah, went to high school, learned in 1945 that my father had survived over 6 years of concentration camps, more than one. And it took him a year to be able to come to the United States. First of all, he was very, very ill. He had typhus, and it took him a long time to recover. And second of all, he had no citizenship papers, which happened to a lot of Jewish people who had been living in Germany but were Germans. Didn't have citizenship in Germany or any kind of papers. So he illegally went to Palestine before Israel, where I had an uncle, my father's brother-in-law, who nursed him back to health, and it took him quite a while to get papers to come to the United States. I don't know if you can imagine what it's like to have been without a parent. For how long, Sarah? From October of 38 to June of 46.
You're asking the wrong person. I can't say that.
You know, I was living an American life. I was in high school. I had friends. I was very athletic. I wanted to be a gym teacher. I played baseball and volleyball, and swimming was one of my passions. And here comes my wonderful survival father who wanted me to come to Palestine. And I wanted to be an American kid. That was probably one of the hardest things I had to go through, is, in a way, it's a rejection, you know? And my father, being a brilliant, intelligent, heart-feeling person, understood it. And so he was able to go between Palestine and then later Israel, when it became a state of Israel, to the United States to see us until 1951. He came on a permanent visa. He was able to get a permanent visa and established himself in New York City. And really, that is my story as a child growing up, because after that, it was normal American life. I met a man, I got married, I had 4 children, I lived in the suburbs, we had 2 cars, we played golf, you know, the normal thing, and didn't speak about anything that happened. Ask that man over there, and he knew nothing. Nobody did. Until many years later, actually, Elie Wiesel, you've all heard of Elie Wiesel, some of you may have even read Night. He is the one really who opened mouths with his writings and his speaking and his teaching, where people like me I didn't affiliate with survivor groups, and I wasn't the only survivor person from Europe living in Rochester, New York, but I just wanted to be an American kid, woman, mother, wife, you know. It was, and talking about it was so painful, because not only do you go through all these changes in your life, in a way your identity has changed. I would lay there in bed at night and say, who would I have been if this hadn't happened? Probably an entirely different person. I would need a psychiatrist to tell me that. But that used to really bother me. Who would I have been if I had stayed with if this hadn't happened? And anyhow.
At what point did you hear about your mother and what happened?
Not until my father came.
And how did he find out? Do you know?
He knew. You know, there were underground communications, just like there were resistance fighters, where people knew from concentration camp to concentration camp, or from village in Poland to city in Germany, as what was happening within, especially the Jewish community. So, let me go back a little bit. My parents, my father especially, knew what was going on in Germany and had applied for visas to England. And he started to send books and other things of value, like cameras, things of value to both Holland, the Netherlands, and Switzerland, and got papers for our family of 4 and my mother's parents, because my mother would not leave unless her parents were coming. When the papers came, my mother and my grandmother would not leave. They, to hear my father talk about it is extremely painful. But again, it would have been a different life. I would have been in England, you know. I wouldn't have this girl. So I'm telling you life stories which you will all have, maybe already have started on your life stories. You don't know where they're going. My grandparents had a textile factory in a town called Bochnia, Poland, doing very well. The Germans occupied, took over the factory with instructions that everybody now was a slave laborer making uniforms for the German army. Textile factory. After we children were sent to Belgium, my mother was able to go to Poland. She worked with her parents in the factory. But what they were doing was falsifying production papers and asking for more workers. But they were also smuggling some of the Jewish people who worked there out of the country. When the Germans found out what was going on in production papers and smuggling, the whole family was shot, which included my mother. And that was, I believe, in September of 1942. That's what happened to my mother, my grandparents, and my father's sister. I had an aunt on my father's side. Yes, many people were lost. When I came to the United States, I had a family that I didn't know about originally living in York, Pennsylvania, the Teilheimer family. They were my father's cousins. Went to visit them. But otherwise, it was my foster family, my sister, she's my sister, Margie, that I grew up with, my brother, who lives in Boston, married, 3 wonderful kids, grandchildren. Yeah.
The foster family is still part of
our
our
the foster family is our family. We, Margie married, had 2 sons. Each of her sons married, and they have 2 children each. And we go to all our events. We always share all our events together. Weddings and bar mitzvahs and special birthdays, and so aren't I one of the lucky ones? Really, I am.
So when you fled with the family from Belgium and France,
Yes.
I remember a couple of years, it was more than a couple of years ago, it was probably 10 years ago, my grandma put together a private memoir for our family. And the grandkids, we had heard bits and pieces of her story growing up, but it had never been written down in a complete form. And my grandma put together this memoir just for us that has pictures that we've never seen, documents. I think, does it have your Ellis Island immigration card?
Yes.
And so it really was, for a lot of us, the first time that we read her story straight through. And what I had never known about, and this was one of the facts that really hit me in the heart when I read the memoir, and it does every time I read through it, was that when you fled with that family, there was tons of traffic on the road, right, coming out of, where was it?
From Belgium to crossing.
And Nazi planes were flying
strafing,
over.
Strafing,
shooting
the people,
on the road.
jumping into ditches to avoid them, and then the cars ran out of gasoline. So for a while we pushed cars, and after a while we abandoned the cars and continued the walk into France. We walked into France is what actually happened.
And it was a hard choice for that family to send you to the...
Yes, it was a hard choice. It was an unbelievably unselfish thing they did just to take me out of They didn't have to take me out of Belgium.
But then they realized that
Well-
you as a Jewish child would.
Yes.
They had a son who was around.
They
your
had a
age.
son, yes, yes.
But you don't remember their names.
All I remember is his first name, and that they had a big townhouse and had a private day school in their home.
Mm-hmm.
And that I went to church with them a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes.
So in your memoir, you also talk about that first moment when you saw the Statue of Liberty as
Oh
you
my-
sailed into New York Harbor. Do you still remember that?
Not only do I remember it, every time I fly into New York City, or at your brother's bar mitzvah when we had the river cruise, the harbor cruise, I cry when I see the Statue of Liberty. I mean, when we kids, all 50 of us, on an overcast morning, one day in September, where there's New York, there's the statue. Everybody ran up to the railings of that ship to see the Statue of Liberty. Unless you've had the experience, you cannot imagine what that statue means. It's America. That's what it means when you first come here.
Mm-hmm.
The statue is America.